Hello, I'm Nigel Thornberry, and today we're looking at the wonderful world of bees. Hey folks, welcome to this episode of Home Health and Hobby. This is another entry into my beekeeping diary. This is not a beekeeping channel, it's more of a how-to kind of informational channel. But last video that I entered into my beekeeping diary, which is up right now, is the newspaper combine. It was a video where hive number 1 was queenless, so I ended up having to because of the time of year, had to combine hive number 1 with hive number 2. If you look here, I'm showing you some clips that didn't warrant enough footage to make an entire episode out of it. So I just wanted to show you here how they had chewed away all of the newspaper, and right up to the border there that I can see. Right up to the edge of the wood, they chewed that newspaper away pretty thoroughly. And if we pull out the bottom board, I ended up having to pull due to it being hot this time during February, which is very unusual. Global warming is a lie. I pulled out the bottom board and I found all of this newspaper shreds that very interesting. But at any rate, we are heading to the Seminole County Beekeepers Club meeting. First meeting I've been to in years. I went to one meeting when I was younger before I got into beekeeping, just trying to learn more about the hobby. Now that I'm in the hobby, the moon and the sun and the earth, they all lined up perfectly, and I was able to make it to tonight's meeting. Still haven't made it there yet, but we will. We're on our way there. Alright guys, Chef Nick here, with Dennis here, the owner, right?
Orlando Bee Removal Expert and Black Hammock Bee Farms.
Okay, so you do an apiary on the side of...
Yeah, so we rescue bees and then we keep bees.
Okay. Alright, well tonight I came out to the Seminole County Beekeeping Club and met Dennis on the phone earlier, as you saw in the video earlier with my newspaper combine. He's the one who gave me the idea of adding a frame of brood into hive number 1 to see if they could get a queen drawn out. Dennis, can you tell me a little bit about what to expect for somebody coming to a beekeeping club who's never been?
Yeah, one of the biggest things with beekeeping is finding people in your local area, in your local geographic area that can, share experiences with you, talk to you about what you expect in your geographic area in terms of timing. When we talk about beekeeping, a lot of people look up north, and the contrast from up north beekeeping to Florida beekeeping is very much night and day.
Mm-hmm. As I've said that before, you heard it from him as well, so probably some truth into it. He's a lot more advanced. Now, can you give some advice on people in their first and maybe second year of beekeeping?
So the first thing I usually tell people is to start out with at least 2 or 3 colonies. And so the reason behind that is a couple things. Number one is, beekeeping is a little difficult in terms of keeping bees alive when you're on a learning curve. So if you have one colony and you make a mistake and you lose that colony, then you'll end up with a bad experience. So if you have multiple colonies, chances of getting 1 or 2 of them through are pretty good. And the second thing, and really most importantly, is if you have a problem with one colony and you need some resources and you don't have those resources, then you're kind of stuck. So if you have resources in a healthy colony, you can use those resources to fix and repair things in an unhealthy colony. So that's the main reason of having additional colonies. So in between the combs, there's what's called a bee space, and that's 3/8 of an inch, and that's just enough space that, basically 2 bees back to back sort of pass by. And if you give them more than 3/8 of an inch, they will build a piece of comb in that space. And if you give them less than 3/8 of an inch, they will propolize it entirely. So there's a real fine line. And so Langstroth basically figured out that we could manipulate the hive. And so these are called frames, right? These wooden things are called frames. I've got all kinds of examples of stuff to show you, and we'll slowly bring those things in. So the movable frame basically was like the whole key to the thing, because back in the olden days they used to use something called skeps, which are basically like this big basket that they would sort of weave together, or they would use what's called bee gums or bee logs, basically logs that they hollowed out that they would, sort of put bees into, or hang up and let bees move into. But the problem was when they would go to harvest the honey, they would essentially destroy the entire colony and kill the colony. In addition, we have stuff that hurts bees. We have American foul brood, we have European foul brood, we have now varroa mites and beetles and all these other little things that become a pain. And so if you can't get into the hive, you can't see that it's healthy or not healthy. You can't take honey out without destroying everything.
Tell me a little bit about the difference between a beekeeper and a bee haver.
So that's a real common thing, and I get that quite a bit, and it's kind of sometimes a red flag when people say to me they want to have bees just to help the bees. And so I love that and I appreciate that, but usually what that means is they want to put a box in their backyard, stick some bees in it, and never talk to them again. And the thing is if their heart's in the right place, but we know as beekeepers it's important to know the health of our colony. So someone described it to me this way, and I think this is probably one of the best descriptions. If your dog had ticks or fleas, would you do something about it?
Right.
And so if you don't look inside your hive, how do you know the colony health? How do you know the condition of the bees? So albeit having bees is something that might make you feel good, it's actually not helping bees or even the beekeeping community to just have bees in your backyard and then have them be unhealthy. So anything that's wrong with them could potentially spread to other colonies nearby, and that's a really big problem.
So treating them like a pet wouldn't be too far off, though.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, bees are natural, but the thing is, bees are not native to this land. And then we've also got pests that have been imported that aren't native or don't belong in the beehive. So since man has gotten involved, we've kind of made things difficult for the bees, and so it's our responsibility to take good care of them.
Okay.
There are two types of foundation. Well, really, there's more than two types, but there's plastic foundation, which both of these are plastic. There's yellow, and there's black. So I really like black because black is a contrast color to the white eggs. So when you're looking for white eggs on a yellow background, it's a little bit more difficult than if you're looking for it on a black background. So also, something I'll mention while we're here, is if you notice this frame kind of looks weird, so I waxed these frames. So I took wax that I had from my bees, melted it down, and used a paint roller and rolled it on here. And so what this does is it actually helps the bees to draw comb out. So what we want them to do is add to this sheet and make the wax deeper, right? And so by giving them some extra wax, it sort of gives them a head start to do that. And so that's a technique that I learned actually from a beekeeper at one of the bee clubs that I go to. Bees produce wax like we talked about earlier. So they have 8 glands on their abdomen that secrete wax. And so they need to consume nectar in order for that process to happen. And so what new beekeepers often will do is when you get a nuke or a nucleus of bees, you put them into your 10-frame box and you feed them, right? We feed them sugar water. And so feeding sugar water stimulates wax production. And so what we want to do is grow the colony. We want to grow the nest bigger. And so that's what we're doing when we're giving them food, is to grow the nest bigger. We also feed in the winter times and times when they don't have food for other reasons. But essentially when you first get your colony, you're generally encouraged to just feed, right? Put sugar water on there and just feed them till they won't take it no more. And then once that box is full and you put a honey super on, then you can cut back on doing that. But anyway, that's sort of the process. So one last little thing is, this is a propolis trap. So we talked earlier about propolis, right? And I told you guys if you have a space less than bee space, that they'll propolize it, they'll fill it in. Well, we're taking advantage of that with this little thing. It's a propolis trap. So these little grooves are less than 3/8 of an inch, and the bees just say, oh, no way, so they fill it in. And so you can see there's a little bit here of propolis. They started to do it. So you put this thing in your freezer and freeze it, and then you pull it out of the freezer and just crack it, and everything, it doesn't come off very easily, to be honest. But it comes off. You just got to work at it a little bit. But when it's frozen, it comes off pretty easy. But anyway, propolis sells for $20 a gram. Yeah.
That's it?
It's pretty expensive. I mean, it does take some effort to get it out of there, but in reality, it just doesn't take much. So this is what's called a queen excluder. So there's plastic ones, there's metal ones, right? And I like the plastic ones because the metal ones, if you put your hive tool in there the wrong way, you can actually bend the little tines that are on here. And if you bend it just a little bit, the queen can squeeze through there. It's exactly the size it's supposed to be. But the trick with these is it keeps the queen from coming up above this thing. When we put another box on top, it's here. So the bees, the workers, can come up in here, no problem. But the queen can't get up in here. And so the reason that's important is 2 things. Is number one, where we're making honey, we don't want the queen laying eggs because that's a mess, right? So we want to restrict the queen to being down here in the box. It restricts her to this box alone. If we allow her to have 2 boxes, then that's twice the space that she can lay eggs, right? And there's benefits and drawbacks to both ways. So some people do it one way and some people do it another, and neither is wrong. It just depends on what your goals are, how you're going to handle that. But traditionally, most people will have a single deep brood box. So single, just the one, deep meaning the tallest, the biggest boxes there are, brood meaning where the queen lays her eggs and reproduces, and so that's going to be the brood area. Then we're going to put a queen excluder on top, and then we're going to put what's called a super. A super is for honey, okay? Anything that's going to have honey is a super. So the reason that we use smaller boxes is because honey is really, really heavy. So if you use a deep box, it's going to kill you to pick these boxes up. And when I first started beekeeping, I was like, yeah, no problem. You just have one kind of box, and you don't have to change. It doesn't matter. You can use anything anywhere. But after picking up heavy boxes for a while, you quickly learn like that was a really bad decision. So now I have these. Because what happens is a colony knows what its box looks like. In fact, earlier we talked about how bees are born and then 21 days and so on and so on. So when bees go on their very first flight, they do something called an orientation flight, and it's cool. It's the coolest thing. Actually, sometimes I'll even get beekeepers that'll be like, "Oh my God, something's wrong with my hive," and I'm like, "What? Send me a video." And they send me a video, and all the bees are orienting, and I'm like, "No, that's great. They're doing what they're supposed to be." And they're like, "Oh, I thought they were leaving," you know. I'm like, "No." So what happens is you've got 1,000 bees like flying around in this figure 8 pattern out front of the hive, right? And it's huge. Like this big cloud of bees is doing something different all of a sudden, you know. So what they're doing is they're flying sort of in a figure 8 at every angle to sort of look like, what does my front of my house look like? Okay, it's got this thing on it right here. It's white. It's this big. It's got a silver top. Okay, that's what my thing looks like. All right. So now they start doing circles, and those circles basically tell them like on the street like what house is yours on the block, right? Like okay, now I know how to get back to this spot, and then those circles get bigger and bigger and bigger until they reach about 1.5 to 2 miles out, and so that tells them what city they live in, what neighborhood they live in, what the house looks like, what the front door looks like, and obviously what it smells like as they start to go in. So most of the time they can manage all those things. But if you've got 10 boxes all lined up and they all look identical, she's going to come out of this box and go in that box, you know? And if she goes out and gets food, it's not a problem. So people always think like bees can't go in another beehive, right? Well, that's not true. So if you show up at my house with a box of stack of Domino's pizza, you smell like a friend, right? And you can come in. But if you
Are you pushing very hard on that?
No, just enough to get it to penetrate. So this one's a little wonky on this side, but that's okay. Usually whenever you pull out honey, frames, they're solid all the way across, but this one was on the edge. And this one actually came out of the bottom box, but I just wanted to do an extraction tonight, so that's what I had. And getting from point A to point B without dripping should be fun.
How many frames does that extractor do?
It does 4 deep frames, or it'll do 12 shallows, I believe. I think maybe 8 or 12. I don't know. It's not my extractor, so I don't use it often. I use that big old giant one at the farm now.
Yeah, I've got a big one.
I cannot tell you how many times I have done one side with this thing and forgot to do the other side. Throw it in the extractor's going all along, and all of a sudden it starts wobbling all over the place. You're like, what the hell's going on? You open it up like, oh, whoops. And also, if you start extracting honey and it starts to fill up in the bottom and you don't open up the little valve, 2 things. Right in the middle, there's like a thing that it turns on, and there's like grease actually in that little spot. So you don't want the honey to run up and get into the grease, because then you get grease in your honey. So you don't want it to go above that spot. So you got to keep the bottom open. Plus, actually, if it raises up too much, then the actual basket that'll be dragging through the honey, you don't want that either. So anyway, don't make that mistake. So if anybody wants to come up and just like check it out, if you look on the outside of this thing, it's flinging the honey all on the outside, and it's kind of interesting to check out. So kind of make a line as you come through or something and check it out.
So is it a pain in the neck to clean this
Smells
thing?
good.
Yeah. I don't usually clean it. Honey is antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal. There's no reason to clean it. I only cleaned it because I was bringing it here and I didn't want everybody to think it was gross or something. But usually I don't clean it. I just put it off to the side and use it next time. So.
The bees will clean it, though.
Yeah, if you leave it outside, the bees will clean it. But I keep it in a place where it's like in a restaurant. So
It's really not worth using it for like 4 frames.
Got it now? I really don't know the true definition.
Kind of like that.
yeah, your kitchen will be a damn mess when you do honey.
Not with the club ranch. We didn't make a big mess at all. It took a long time.
You do crush and strain, boy, you better expect to clean up your kitchen. It's going to be a mess.
How long does it take from the time you have too much trouble with it?
But that's possible. Where's my cup?
Really? Do we get to stick our finger in the tip?
Yeah, I got cups. I'm going to just dump a little bit into every cup. Anybody that wants some.
That's beautiful. Nice and dark.
Honey.
This is wildflower.
Oh, you just
I
call it
mean,
wildflower.
really, I probably, if they were all yellow like that, I would probably use it. Probably that's all of that
Is it
stuff.
specifically for bees or something you're
Specifically
just
for honey, yeah.
for honey?
And it has two. It has like a tight one and then like a more loose one that goes in the top so that it catches the big pieces first. But all the beekeeping places suck. You want to pass those out for me? You can eat the wax. It will not hurt you. It's the citrus bloom. So we have the maples.
It's got a really good spicy flavor to it. And just the last question about the bee club itself. Can you tell a little bit about the audience for what kind of people would show up?
So, I mean, really, we get pretty much all walks of life. We get young, we get old, men, women, people that come from a gardening or environmental background, people that have, will say things like, oh, I never thought I'd do this, So it's a real family-friendly type environment. We have, refreshments and snacks and things of that nature. And we have raffles, and we keep it, family-friendly. And so we learn about bees, but we also learn about other things like plants and other pollinators and, how we make our food in this country. So there's a lot of rounded information. In fact, this year our focus is very much on non-beekeepers.
Okay.
So last year we spent a lot of time on trying to attract all the beekeepers in our area, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that. So this year we're focused on educating non-beekeepers, people that just want to learn about bees, how they work, how honey is produced, how our food is grown. So we're just really trying to educate people.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, the Seminole County Beekeeping Club, they hold meetings on the first Wednesday of each month, and then there are occasional days in the bee yard, which is on a weekend, right?
Yeah. So here at the Seminole County Club, we actually have an apiary just right outside our club. And in our bee yard, we have a couple colonies there. So the Saturday following our Wednesday night meetings, we have a day in the bee yard. And so we'll have different classes, different topics, different things that we're doing to educate people and get hands-on for people that maybe have never touched bees before.
Okay, cool. All right, well, if you guys want to find out more, come to a beekeeping club and subscribe to the video. And Dennis, thank you so much.
Awesome. Have a sweet day.
Thank you.